Hello everyone, my name is Brett Keane and I was going to talk about two particular movies. One that I watched a while back as well as one that I watched recently, having to do with biblical stories. I watched a movie called The Ten Commandments recently, and in the past I watched this movie called Prince of Egypt. And both of the movies are based upon the same thing, of course. Moses going in, doing the plagues and all that on Ramses the Pharaoh, and trying to free the Israelites, the Hebrews, from slavery. Now, on the particular movie that I watched, Prince of Egypt, that movie I watched quite a few years back pretty much by myself. Just watched it because I enjoy cartoons and I enjoy seeing how religious movies are actually represented. It's interesting because I myself, I'm not a religious person. I don't believe in any of the stories. Whenever I watch a story, a movie about Joshua or King David or Moses, I watch it for the same reason that I watch movies like Batman, Superman, and Spider-Man, Spawn, any superhero villain movie, because I don't see it as real, but I see it as a form of entertainment. It's something interesting to watch. It's something to spend your hour and a half doing whenever you're bored. Well, um, this particular movie that I watched recently called The Ten Commandments, I watched it with my son. And none of my family are really very religious, not in my household. Outside the household, I have family members that live all over the place who share in very hardcore religious beliefs that are part of different denominations. Well, my son and I, we watched it, and Ben Kingsley did the narration for it, and Christian Slater actually played the voice of Moses, which I found to be very weird. I've always thought that I guess I've always perceived that if you're going to play a character like Moses, you should probably have a very low, strong, powerful voice, something that's very commanding. Christian Slater doesn't have a very commanding voice. He sounds like a young version of Jack Nicholson, so him playing Moses was kind of unusual in itself. But nonetheless, he did okay. He did pretty good. That also could be from my past movie watching of Christian Slater. And I guess when we watch actors and celebrities, we kind of get our own idea or our own stereotypical view of how we perceive an actor in a movie. And it might be my own doing as opposed to Christian Slater and his voice. All right. Well, the deal is I watched the movie, and as usual, in most religious cartoons as well as most religious movies, the characters like Moses are always represented as heroes. The movie makes it appear as though he went in and he solved the problem by taking 430,000 slaves out of captivity, and that he stood up basically against the government of that time and said this is the way God wants it and this is the way it's going to be. And of course there's a lot of magical tricks and neat special effects where he turns the water into blood and causes flies to come, and of course the killing of the firstborn and all this. But people are able to forgive the whole death of the baby thing because the movie makes it appear as though it was all because of Ramsey why God had to do it. It was Ramsey's fault because he wouldn't allow Moses to take the slaves away, so they needed to be punished by God killing the little babies and stuff like that. And you can almost, while watching the movie, if you were to watch it in a fictional way, um, go, the superhero had to do what he had to do in order to free the slaves. It's almost forgivable, even though it's genocide. Isn't that unusual? It's weird for me to say that, I know, but the way the cartoon was represented, it made it appear as though God had to do this and God had to do that. And me and my son, when we watched it, it was actually an enjoyable experience. It sounded fun to watch. However, on the other hand, I realize that I'm an adult, and I realize that I have actually read the Bible. I've actually read the the story about the birth of Moses all the way to his end. And I notice when I watch these cartoons, they always cut out all kinds of stuff about Moses. They always take out a lot of information, and they only stick with the Ten Commandments and him doing good, positive things like freeing people. And even in the cartoon, whenever he murdered an Egyptian that was whipping on a slave, they almost made it look almost moral for what he did. Again, made it almost seem forgivable for his destruction and killing of another human being. What the movie did not show, though, were things like Numbers chapter 31, verse 17 through 18, where the God character tells Moses repeatedly to go inside of villages and cities and murder little babies and women and men over and over and over again. The story doesn't tell you about how God almost killed Moses because he didn't circumcise one of his sons. The movie does not tell you about how Moses was basically going into cities, not only killing people, but stealing their property and destruction. And the movie also doesn't show you how God lied about giving the Israelites their promised land. He made them walk through a desert. He made them go through a living hell in order to get to where they were. The whole point was that they were supposed to go through all this shit after being led out of captivity so they could be led to a promised land that was filled with milk and honey, as what was prophesied. But at the end of very clearly in the story of Moses, Moses never got to the promised land. God never fulfilled his promise towards the Israelites of giving them these lands and wonderful stuff. The movie, however, lied. The movie says that God just simply cursed one generation, waited for the older men and women to die, and then allowed the young people who had carried on through the desert to get to this wonderful, beautiful paradise, this promised land. But the Bible never said that. The Bible never said that they ever got that at all. In fact, the Bible's very clear that a lot of these groups and a lot of these people of Israelites were separated and spread and scattered throughout the land like cockroaches and shit. So I wonder why it is whenever people make movies about religious subjects, they always delete. It's like they intentionally, deliberately try to make the characters look like they're just pure saintly heroes who would never do anything wrong or do anything bad, but and they represent the character as just someone who would never do any wrong or hurt a fucking fly. It's weird for me. I wonder if they do it deliberately. Do they do it intentionally? Or are they just trying to make a movie where they're just wanting you to see the small parts, just what they consider important? I don't know. Because I know if one were to try to do a movie based upon Moses' entire existence, detail for detail, it would be a pretty long movie. It could probably turn into a 6-hour film. But I don't know. What do you think? Do you think religious people deliberately make the movies out to look all sweet and wonderful, or do they not know the whole story of Moses? What's the fucking problem? Why don't they ever talk about these things? Why, whenever they, the movie, I'll give it credit for this. It does show you that an angel of death comes out of the sky and sends all these like spirits into all these people's homes to kill the firstborn of Egypt, but you don't get to see what happens inside the doorways. You don't get to see what the evil spirits of God that God sent forth actually do to the babies. You hear like a little bit of crying, and then the movie kind of leaves it up to your imagination. I wonder how people would be affected if they got to actually see a cartoon or a movie where the flies are actually eating up the children and the cows and the people, as opposed to just seeing Moses put his stick down and cause the lice and the flies and everything else and the frogs to come into the land Why don't they show in detail what it would have been like physically, people's health? Why don't they show parts where people are actually drinking the water that they think is water and getting that blood in their mouth and stuff so they could see what it tastes like and how miserable it is? I don't know. It's just weird for me, and I wonder, would parents really want their kids to watch Moses, even in the limited material they give in the movies, if they actually showed in detail what it was like with Ramses torturing the slaves and all that kind of stuff? Would parents still want their children to watch it? Because at this point, I think that anybody could sit down and watch The Prince of Egypt and the Ten Commandments and not be offended or bothered in any way because of the way they represent it. But the Bible, let's just put it this way, the Bible and the cartoons, I don't think can coexist. They don't coincide. You're watching a completely different Moses on the cartoons and movies than you're actually reading about in the Bible. Thank you. You've been listening to Brett Keane.